For the first opening part of our time together today, I always like to spend some time doing an educational piece. So we walk away feeling more empowered with more knowledge. Knowledge is power. And the more we know about covert abuse and the impact it has and what to do about it, the stronger we'll be in defending ourselves against it and healing from it. So we want to talk about 3 different phases of a survivor's journey, and we're going to spend time today talking about the last phase, and that may seem counterintuitive, but you'll understand why in a moment. But just to outline, very aerial view level, this is taken from a threat assessment conference I went to. I belong to the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, and it's an organization that's composed of FBI, CIA agents, district attorneys, forensic psychologists, domestic violence advocates, very few advocates in fact, but people that are involved in the world that ranges from domestic violence, stalking behavior, to terrorist threats and mass shootings. And I learned about this paradigm here from Reed Malloy, and he talked about this approach that perpetrators take when they are thinking of attacking a target, somebody that has caused a grievance. We're going to go into more detail about this on another occasion, but just so you know that the first step in looking at abuse is, what does it look like? What is the build up to it? The better to help you protect yourself from it. So we'll talk about that on another day, and the fine points that go along with it. Once you have recognized that this is a perpetrator that you're dealing with, once you have done everything you can to protect yourself from it and then eventually escape from it, here are the paths along that journey, planning your escape to finally executing your escape. And then after you have left or escaped your abusive relationship, what then? What's the next step that happens then? And so often that last step gets lost along the way as survivors lose contact with the court system and their kids turn 18 and go off to college. Well, what then? So once the escape happens, like what we say here at WomenSV is that true healing cannot begin until you get safe. And that's why if you are seeing a therapist, I would suggest you talk to that therapist about ways to protect yourself mentally and emotionally and to prepare yourself for the battle that lies ahead. Instead of focusing on perhaps spending a lot of time talking about what happened in your childhood or processing self-esteem issues or really doing that deep, hardcore healing, I would suggest, I'm not a therapist, I'm an advocate, but I will also say I do trainings for advocates and trainings for therapists, and unfortunately therapists don't get training typically in coercive control, covert abuse, and they tend to see abuse as a communication issue that both parties participate in. And if you go to see an individual therapist, they may focus on your, in quotes, childhood wounds or what your role is in it. And if you're dealing with the type of abuser that we're talking about here, that is not going to serve you, because as far as the abuse goes, you don't have a role in causing that abuse. You're an innocent victim of the crime, the liberty crime of coercive control. And so that's when I think the therapeutic approach is best used to help you deal with the panic, with the terror, with the immediate trauma of being forced to face your trauma trigger, your partner, who may soon become your ex. But what do you do to steel yourself when you're going into court and you have to face the person that has terrorized you? How do you keep your calm, keep your cool, keep yourself from going into panic mode when you're dealing with this person that's been the source of so much trauma? So to try to do that sort of hardcore investigation into the deep underlying sources of pain and suffering, and to begin to heal from that takes time, that takes peace, that takes safety. So that kind of healing isn't going to happen until you're safe. And the education part is to help you recognize the type of abuse that you're being subjected to, because you're not going to have bruises or broken bones to show for it. Like, you don't need anybody to tell you if somebody has broken your nose or sent you to the hospital. That's hardcore domestic violence. But what we're talking about is the type that leaves no physical evidence behind. How hard that is to identify. And if you can't identify it, how can you protect yourself from it? So safety first, always. And then that's when the true healing can begin. So once you're out, once you're on the other side, that's when the true healing can begin. Even though it may seem like we're doing this sort of backwards, starting with the last step first, it's because we want you to focus on the hope, the healing, the recovery, the light that's on the other side of this long, dark tunnel and the horrific battlefield you may find yourself on now. So once you're out, once you've escaped, then that's when the true healing can begin, once you're safe. And so what does that look like? Well, so safety in your physical environment, where you are in your own home now, where you no longer have to be attentive to the sound of his footsteps coming down the hall, and is that going to tell you what mood he's in? It's you being in your own place where you can at least wake up in the morning without him beside you, without him shouting orders and commands and criticism and threats. That physical environment of safety is so important. And then really thinking about your post-separation safety plan. What does that look like for you? Do you have cameras in place? What's the travel distance between where you park and where you enter your front door? What does your workplace look like? Where do you park there? And how vulnerable are you between your car and your workplace? Does he know where you work? Does he know where you live now? Have you thought about being in the Safe at Home program to protect your current address? If not, do you have neighbors you trust who are willing to look out for you? Is there a restraining order in place so that he's not to come anywhere near your place? And if he does, will the neighbors alert you? Do you have a Ring doorbell so you know who's knocking on your door? Have you talked to your kids, especially if they're young kids, about not opening the door to anybody, including daddy, even if he knocks urgently at 8 o'clock at night and says, "You got to let me in"? Have you had those conversations with your children to keep yourself and your children safe? So that safety in your external environment, but then also internal safety. Learning to feel what it feels like to be safe in your own body. When you're with an abuser, you feel anything but safe with an abuser. And sometimes you can be cornered, trapped in the home without being able to leave. And when that happens, often what happens is this dissociative state where you leave your body. You want to be anywhere but inside your body. And that can lead to denial, because denial is a way of protecting yourself from the horror of who it is and what it is you're living with. How can you face the horror every moment of the day and get food on the table and the kids off to school and yourself to work? How can you live with horror and what is required to keep the home going? And that's where denial can become a coping mechanism. But watch out for that, because the denial, the numbing, the forgiveness, forgetting, the minimization, all of these skills that help you live your life, your daily life, and survive. Once you are out the other side, these things, they can, well, even in the relationship, they can also cause you to minimize the level of danger and risk you're in. So feeling that you are out, being out of that relationship doesn't necessarily mean now that you are physically safe, just because you're not waking up next to him anymore. Because the danger level spikes for about 2 years after the relationship ends. What are the 3 top lethality risks? Coercive control, ending the relationship, and gun ownership. Those 3 are the 3 top lethality risks with an abuser. And once the relationship is over, don't think that, well, now he's going to, forget or be distracted by a girlfriend or get on with his life. You may be more than ready to move on with your life, but he may be ruminating, nursing that grievance. So safety first, always. How can you start to think about healing, processing any childhood wounds, any vulnerabilities? If you've had another loss in your life, or you've moved to a new town, or lost a relative that was important to you, if you've had any of these losses, any of these past childhood wounds, any life changes, these are all vulnerabilities that can set you up to be vulnerable to an abusive relationship going forward. So healing whatever darkness may lie within you is as important as celebrating the light that lies within you. We all have a little darkness, right? We all have a lot of light, but watch out for the little bit of darkness that may be within you. Whatever pain, trauma, vulnerability, loneliness you may be experiencing can set you up to long for companionship, to be lured by charm. And these guys, they have so much surface charm, and we lack sufficient education to truly recognize early warning signs and early red flags of controlling behavior. And that's where the education piece comes in, to keep you safe, so that you can start to set boundaries, see what he does with them, start to recognize warning signs and act on them quickly before you get in too deep and stay too long. So getting safe externally, and then searching for safety within, feeling comfortable again in your body, starting to get some self-regulation skills in place so that when the next step begins to happen, you will be able to tolerate the feelings that will rise up within you as you remember the horror, the terror, the pain of being exposed to that kind of undeserved cruelty. These are horrible things that he may have said and done to you and possibly to your children. And how to tolerate the remembrance of that pain and horror and terror inflicted on you without losing your mind. In the beginning, to try to go there, it's going to be like standing in the middle of 280 and having somebody hand you a piece of paper and saying, here, fill this out, or here, tell me about your childhood wounds. You're busy dodging the tractor trailers that are whizzing by right now. So we get to the side of the road, we get safe, and then we start to develop self-regulation skills to help deal with our rapid heart rate, with all the neurons firing that may want to fire at once when we are exposed to the trauma, when we go down into the cellar to recognize the things that have haunted us. So what are some things that can help in the way of self-regulation to deal with the pain and the horror that may surface as you're beginning to process what you've been through once you're in a physically safe place? What are some things that can help? Things like, we talk about sky breathing a lot, breathing techniques, series of breathing exercises that have been clinically shown to lower your blood pressure and your heart rate and to help you deal with anxiety and depression and PTSD. So things like sky breathing, tapping, you can look up some YouTube videos on emotional freedom techniques like tapping. I'm reading this book called The Sugar Brain Fix now that talks about serotonin and dopamine boosting foods and activities. So you want to get your happy hormones in place to help you deal with the road that lies ahead. Exercise, can release all those happy hormones too. So can you, if you haven't before, can you start thinking about some kind of exercise routine that you can tolerate? I hate exercise, but if you can find something, it used to be dance for me. Walking along the beach or water is really healing for me. So walks in nature, trauma-informed yoga. We have our exhale to inhale group that we talk about a lot. Really good nutrition, getting your 8 hours of sleep every night, taking your vitamins, finding a source of income so that you're not struggling from paycheck to paycheck. What can you do to have that sort of feeling of safety, financial safety over your head, and really feeling like you've got a safe place to lay your head down at night? So all of those things go in to safety outside and safety within. I hope you're able to find a trauma-informed therapist who understands trauma as it relates to covert abuse and coercive control and the dark tetrad. If you want to learn more about the dark tetrad, you can take a look at my YouTube video, Unmasking Dr. Jekyll. You want a therapist that understands all those things, because this is not a typical dysfunctional relationship or a typical relationship that just didn't work out because you both have different values now or you've changed in different ways. It's not a hallmark moment leaving somebody like this. It's you discovering that you married Dr. Jekyll or got involved with Dr. Jekyll and then woke up to Mr. Hyde. Through no fault of your own, you got sold a bill of goods. This was fraud. He presented himself as one person to you, and then you discover he's actually another person. What you met was the mask, and then the mask slipped, and now he's going to have a grievance against you for daring to see what lies beneath the mask. What lies lie beneath the mask. So the next step then, once you've gotten yourself physically safe, and perhaps find, if not a therapist, then perhaps a trauma-informed friend or an advocate or some kind of peer group, woman to woman, sharing our experiences and validating one another, giving suggestions and resources and saying, well, this is what worked for me. This is all healing here. Why? Because we think about the abuser's strategies. What's his strategy, and then what's our counter strategy? His strategy is to isolate you, to take all your sources of support off the table, the better to control you with. His strategy is to have you end up walking on eggshells, living in fear of setting him off. What can I do today to keep the peace? So that your whole world shrinks and your horizon is only as far as encompasses him. That monopolization of perception that we talk about, where it's all about what is his mood, what is he saying to you, what is he planning, what is he wanting you to do, and what are you trying to avoid happening as a result of being with him. So that's his strategy, to have your whole focus be on him, to manipulate you, to have you walk on eggshells, to basically to be living in fear. These guys often confuse or conflate respect with fear. Another part of his strategy is to really encourage you to live in denial, to minimize the damage that he's done, to have you forget it, to slough it off, or to treat it as a joke, or to tell you you're being too sensitive, to gaslight you, so that to encourage you to lapse into denial, the better to control you, so you won't think of leaving, or that there's something that you can't change in your own behavior to fix things, because truly there isn't. So watch out for those strategies of manipulation, gaslighting, having you live in fear, encouraging you to deny, to live in denial, and to isolate you. Because now we want to work on the counter strategy. So to have you live in fear, well, the counter to that, walking on eggshells, having your own place where you're walking in safety, at least physically in your home. Having that mental state where you're living, feeling like you're walking on eggshells and always afraid of setting him off, getting inside yourself and feeling comfortable in your own skin again with these trauma-informed techniques and tactics of the things we talked about, tapping and yoga and these other things that get you comfortable back in your body. The counter strategy to his strategy of having you live in denial, minimizing the abuse, encouraging you to forget it. So many of our ladies say, I used to have a memory. Maybe it wasn't so bad, or that cycle of abuse where he's being nice, causing you to maybe forgive or forget, or the horrible things he said to you just the night before. Watch out for that. The counter strategy to that, once you're safe, is remembrance and mourning. And if you want to look more closely at these stages of safety, remembrance and mourning, and then reconnection, take a look at Judith Herman's book, Trauma and Recovery. So this stage of remembrance and mourning, now remember, we set the table with our self-regulation skills to deal with the pain, the emotion, the trauma that will be rising up within you as you start to remember things he said, the things he did to you and to perhaps your children. And it can start with you sharing your story with a friend, with somebody who's trauma-informed, with a domestic violence advocate, with a therapist who's, again, trauma-informed. But the goal here is to move from the story having power over you to you in telling and retelling your story, to you gaining power over your story. And that's why we have our executive summary workshop. One of the many reasons that we have it as well, for you to gain power over your narrative. It's part of taking your power back. As he once stole your power from you, the counter strategy is for you to start taking that power back by taking your story back. And not in isolation anymore, but just looking ahead briefly to that third step in reconnection. So if abuse happens in isolation, by isolating you from your friends, from your peers, from other sources of support, the better to control you, then help and support and healing come from reconnection, from places like here, where we get to share our story with other women to validate our experiences. Oh, what? So it's not normal for him to come in at 1 o'clock in the morning and wake me up and rant and rave at me for 3 hours about how useless and lazy and stupid I am? That's not normal? No, that's not normal. That's abuse. That's sleep deprivation. You can lose your mind from lack of sleep. It can kill you. Lack of sleep can kill you. It's a form of domestic violence that leaves no physical evidence behind. That kind of validation can be so helpful and doesn't happen in isolation. It comes from reconnection. But back to step 2 here, the remembrance. Remembrance followed by mourning. So remembering your story with a safe person to tell it to. And in our executive summary workshop, we take that narrative that is so diffuse and amorphous. It's like trying to grab onto fog, right? And we see how diffused that narrative is. We ask one question about, do you have kids? And then it leads into a whole long story. And it often reminds me of the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, where this fellow was on his way to a wedding, and then this man, this sailor, this shipwrecked sailor, runs up to him, grabs him by the lapels, and he says, I have a story to tell you. And it's his story of pain and suffering and loss and terror and ultimately survival. But that's that urgency that our ladies have so often. I have a story to tell you, and nobody's believing me. And here they find a safe place where somebody finally believes them and listens to them and validates them, but there's so much to tell, where to start, how to prioritize. How can you prioritize when you've been living in terror, when you've been living with a domestic terrorist, and danger can come from any corner? There are landmines planted in your home, which has become a battlefield, which was supposed to be a sanctuary, which became a field of landmines. And you don't know, is it going to be a comment you made about, oh, the dishwasher broke today? Is it going to be your son coming home with a B on a report card? Is it going to be you asking about what the bank balance is? What is going to be the bomb that sets him off today that you didn't even know had the fuse lit. So that's the problem with trauma, is if danger can come from any corner, any conversation, anything you say, then danger can come from every corner. So what's important? Everything's important. And that's another reason why we say, let's spend 3 minutes getting the basics across, the underlying meat and potatoes of your story, how long you were married, how many kids you have, what's happening, to ground you, to give you something to work from, and then to structure your story within 3 minutes so you can practice reining it in. Because trauma takes you all over the place, because danger, it happens all over the place. So remembrance and mourning with somebody who's trauma informed to help you rein that narrative in, help you in telling and retelling your story to gain power over it. In our executive summary workshop, you can turn that long, long story, that odyssey that you've experienced, into a 2-page bullet point summary, executive summary, so that you don't have to keep retelling your story, and you can tweak it depending on who you want to get help or support or validation or belief from. So that remembrance part also helps give you language to put on what you've experienced. Like, you learn terms like gaslighting and undermining the relationship between your children and you, the psychological manipulation that happens, the financial abuse, the coercive control, the covert abuse, the dark tetrad. These terms that we use start to build a vocabulary. So it's not you grasping at fog anymore, thinking there's something wrong with you, like you're anxious or depressed, or somehow you're losing pieces of yourself, but you're not clear why, because you've got no broken bones or bruises to show for it. Now you're going to have words to put on it and say, here is the liberty crime of coercive control. I experienced force, fraud, forgery, embezzlement, they would call it, right? If he's stealing money from the joint account. That's what they call it out in the business world, but what do they call it in a marriage? So over time, you realize you are the innocent victim of the liberty crime of coercive control. If you take a look at Family Code 6320, you'll see examples listed in Family Code, in the Family Code itself now, of what coercive control looks like, and recognizing that it is dangerous behavior, it is part of disturbing the peace, and it can become grounds for a restraining order in family court, which if violated can become a criminal case. So remembering what happened and the impact it had on you, and then developing strategies to address it and then heal from it. That's where a trauma-informed therapist can help you with things like EMDR or somatic therapy or hypnosis or CBT or past life regression, whatever floats your boat, and maybe all of it. It just talk therapy alone, I don't think is going to cut it, because it's not just words that we're dealing with here. It's what happened in our body, in our heart, in our mind, in our soul. All of these things have been impacted. So maybe healing is going to come from all of those different modalities as well. So remembrance, what he did, the impact it had on you and your children, on your life, on your career, on your identity, little pieces of you where they lost along the way, that death by 1,000 cuts, taking time to remember that, to acknowledge it, but then also taking time to grieve the loss of so many things. Was this the relationship that you dreamed would last a lifetime? Was this the man that once was the man of your dreams and now has become your worst nightmare? What about the relationship with your children? Has that been impacted? Has that been lost? How about your financial security? Has that been impacted? If you spent your life savings defending yourself as a covert abuser survivor, as a coercive control survivor, have you spent your life savings defending yourself as if you were the problem in family court? Have you lost everything? Your confidence, your self-esteem, your happiness, your short-term memory, your family, perhaps even members of your own extended family? Have they gone over to the dark side, believing him and not you because he has this other face for them? They only ever get to see Dr. Jekyll. You're the only one, and perhaps your children, the only ones that saw Mr. Hyde. Have you lost your home? Have you lost that relationship you thought would last forever? That is worthy of grief, and I think it must be acknowledged. And everybody's period of grief is individual. And if you've physically lost a loved one, they think after a year you should be, back and functioning again. But that's not a fair assessment of how long it takes to heal from, especially if you were married to this man for 10, 20, 30 years. It's going to take time to heal from it. And I'll bet there were good moments too. And are you feeling guilty or torn? And are you missing him on some level? Or is there even some love there for the good times? That's where a journal can help too, so that you are jotting down not just the good times, but the times where he hurt you, where he said things that the only way you could survive them was by forgetting them. So all of that is so important to do. Getting safe, remembering with a safe person, and then mourning the loss of what you hoped would last forever, and then finally reconnection, reconnecting. And you can move back and forth in these stages as well. But as abuse happens in isolation, reconnection, that's where the healing happens, reconnecting with others. So you know why the abuser isolated you, right? As we talked about, the better to control you and replace your view of the world and yourself and where you fit in with his. Now it's about where you fit into his world. So now the counter strategy is to reestablish that connection with starting with yourself. And that's where that trauma-informed therapy can help, or some other healing modality. But remembering also, who were you before the relationship? That's why in our work together, we ask, what were your passions, your hobbies, your interests? Who were you before getting into this relationship? Who are you now as a result of everything you've experienced and been hurt by and overcome and grown from? Because you are now an even better version of who you were before because of what you've experienced. That's a silver lining in this horrible dark cloud that you've been living in, that now you have more empathy, no doubt, more compassion for the suffering of others because of what you have suffered and survived. So that's what we talk about in our time together, that how we help each other, lift one another up, and helping ourselves and each other move forward. Part of that is the safety plan. Part of it is learning to set boundaries in our new relationships, and even relationships we've had. We start to see the dysfunction in them and how they've hurt us. Maybe we'll take a class in self-defense. Maybe that's a safe way of reconnecting with the world and empowering ourselves. Maybe we'll find our new survivor mission, where we find a way to make meaning out of the trauma in a way that helps others. Maybe we'll start to make some new friends, but first with some new guidelines, having them earn our trust first, rather than giving them the benefit of the doubt, as we may have done in the past. Maybe we'll start to recognize our own vulnerabilities. What is making us vulnerable to slipping into another relationship before we're ready? Are we lonely? Did we have an issue with our fathers growing up? Or did we come from a healthy home? Whether you come from a healthy or unhealthy environment, you're equally vulnerable to getting into a relationship with a guy like this if you don't know the warning signs to look for. So could our vulnerabilities be not having sufficient knowledge about what coercive control looks like in the early stages, the better to get out before we get in too deep? So this is a time when we hope that we can set aside any shame, any self-blame, any guilt, and put it back on the person that belongs to. Because your partner, your ex-partner, no doubt, does not do guilt. He does blame. Instead of feeling guilty for any harm done, he finds someone to blame for any harm that's done. And then finally, if there's any forgiveness to be done, if you blame yourself, please forgive yourself for staying. If you could have done anything different then, wouldn't you have done something different then? You did what you could with the information, the support, the resources you had at the time. Now you have new information. Now you have new resources. Now you have new support. So now you can make an informed decision, and you can take responsibility for getting your power back and making new decisions going forward, now that you have more information and more resources and more support. Can you please recognize that you were an innocent victim of the liberty crime of coercive control that didn't even have a name for it until January of last year in family court? How new that is. I've been doing this work for 11 years, served over 1,000 women, but family court in California is just beginning to recognize it now. So now part of this reconnection is getting back, reconnecting with yourself. Reconnecting with yourself. Who am I? What do I want? Isn't that an unusual question? What do I need right now? What do I want right now? Go to a restaurant, look at a menu. Can you decide what you want? Making small decisions, ordering something on Amazon just because it pleases you? What do you need? What do you want? And then what about your children now? Reaching back out to them, trying to rebuild, reconnect with them to heal that relationship that he has worked so hard to destroy. And maybe at some point that you think is the right time for you, maybe even starting to share your story with them. Not to shame or blame the abuser, not to disparage the other side, but to help them understand what you went through and what you have done to recover, what they have gone through, and maybe to help explain some of their feelings, some of that simmering rage, or why do they explode, or why do they say horrible things, why are they anxious, why are they depressed, why do they show signs of PTSD? Could this be something that is happening to them as well that they don't have language yet for? So you can help them to heal and recover and recognize early warning signs in their friends and their dating partners going forward, because of what you're learning now. Like, what a wonderful world is out there. And you know, there's a lot of good men out there, a lot of good women, and a lot of good men still out there. But we have to be able to distinguish between the ones who look good and the ones that are good. So, also in sharing your story with your children, you're also modeling vulnerability, lessons learned, those tender feelings, how you felt, and what you're doing now to recover, and how you're finding ways to take care of yourself, and how you hope to teach them those skills as well. So, and through all these things, this is how a new hope is resurrected. Real hope, not the false hope you had before in that relationship where there were those periods of peace where he was being nice, or at least not being, verbally abusive or controlling. Weren't there periods of time where maybe you went on vacation or he said something nice or brought you flowers? Watch out for those periods of false peace that present false hope, resurrect false hope, to make you think that he could go back to making you think that this is the man I fell in love with, and maybe he could stay that man this time. If you keep that journal, no doubt you'll see that pattern emerge. You'll see the constellation emerge, the star here, the star there, that creates that constellation of this is an abuser, a coercively controlling, covert abuser. I can't change him. All I can do is protect myself going forward from him. So here we have all the steps to recovery. It's one model. You may find others that make sense to you, but this is one that makes sense to me. And just please know also that there's no timeline to healing, no timeline to recovery. You've been through hell and you had the devil as your escort. And now you've got a band of angels on your side around you here with all your sisters here. Now it's all getting ever closer to light and hope and healing, and it's ongoing. And please know that it could be 2 steps forward one day, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 10 steps back. It's a lifelong process, but we want to maybe even think about it as this sort of spiral staircase that's either leading upward toward light and healing and hope and reconnection, or back down towards darkness and perhaps getting involved with somebody like this person, maybe version 2.0. Watch out for that. But know that recovery is a lifelong process. It happens in connection with other people, reconnection. It's non-linear, and it requires saying yes to the world once again. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video, subscribe, and click the link in the video description to donate if you can, to help support the work of this program. For more information and resources, you can visit us at womensv.org.